Wonderful. Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Committee on Equal Opportunities. The meeting is being held virtually via Zoom, and all audio and video is being streamed for the public. Are there any questions before we get started? I just want to remind everyone that to meet the new open meetings requirement, we ask that you keep your camera on anytime business is being discussed, but you may stay muted unless speaking or voting. We'll start with a roll call. Dr. Offit?
Judy Eggins, Whitney Allen, Rochelle Brown,
Present.
David Carpenter, Robert Croft,
Present.
Kelly Ellis,
Present.
Faith Kemper,
Present.
Letitia Robertson, Elaine Walker.
Present. Do we have a
Chair, you
quorum?
have a quorum present.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the adoption of the agenda. The agenda for today's meeting was provided in your meeting materials. Is there a motion to approve and second?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Kelly Ellis,
Second.
second by Faith Kemper. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. We have the approval of the minutes. The January meeting minutes were provided in your meeting materials. Do we have a second, a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Motion.
We have a motion by Kelly Ellis and a second by Faith Camper. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. We now have updates from Travis Powell, CPE's Vice President and General Counsel, who will provide legislative updates on a very active session.
Yes, very active session. Thank you, Chair Walker. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you all being on the call. Before I get started, I know you guys are going over the review teams today and the reports from the review teams. I just want to say to each and every one of you, thank you so much for your participation. I say this every year, but it's a long process, a difficult process at times, considering all the material that you have to review, but everybody takes it very, very seriously and gives such great feedback every year to this really continuous improvement model that we have implemented as part of our diversity report review. So anyway, just thanks so much for your time and effort spent on this. It means a lot to the campuses, and it means a lot to us at CPE. So thank you. But yes, busy legislative session. We had a budget session. Obviously, I'll start with the budget session. We're going to talk about some other bills that passed and some of those that didn't pass. But House Bill 6 was the main executive branch budget bill. There were a couple other bills that appropriated some funds, but that was the main operating budget, executive branch operating and capital budget for the General Assembly. Very good year for higher education. Record levels of funding received on a percentage basis. You know, I've been around long enough to remember when 5-6 years ago we were asking a General Assembly to not cut us in an amount that they proposed to cut and give us a smaller cut than was being proposed, and now we're actually able to advocate for funds and receive some money, and it's definitely a different posture to be in, and it's a nice one to be in. So we really are glad that we're able to starting to see investments back in higher education and see the support from the General Assembly in funding. Overall, for operating expenses, just across the board for all our campuses, received about a 7% increase in 2025 and a 7.9% increase in 26 in funding. That includes funding to fund increases in the state fire and tornado fund contributions. The state is self-funded for fire and tornado insurance, building insurance, essentially. And considering all the natural disasters that we've had across the state, as you might imagine, if we're self-insuring for those, and those amounts have gone up tremendously. And so the contributions were significantly increased by the state Department of State Risk, but the General Assembly stepped up and funded our campuses for those increases. So we're very appreciative of that. In addition, gave about a 4% increase across the board to all our campuses for operating expenses, and then put an additional $17 million in our performance funding model. And again, overall, that's about a 7.9% increase over the next 2 years. We're very pleased about. In addition, on the capital side, we saw investments for asset preservation dollars, and those are just what they sound like. Those are dollars to help fix existing buildings and bring them up to where they need to be. Our deferred maintenance for our campus buildings is in the multiple $1 billion at this point. Many years of underfunding for those, but we're starting to at least get some money to spend and to bring those buildings back to where they need to be, so our students can use those at the levels that they need to be used at. And so we received over the biennium about $600 million for asset preservation. And then also for new construction, in total, received over about $1 billion in funding for new construction across all our campuses. KSU did not receive funding for a new project to build in this biennium. They did receive $5 million for design funds for the new health sciences building, but in turn, they also received a higher proportion than they would have otherwise received for asset preservation. And I can tell you from working on that campus, those asset preservation dollars are really in dire need. So they were glad to receive those, and also glad to see, even though they maybe would have liked to have done the project a year earlier, to receive those design funds to help map out what that project might look like, so they can ask for funding in the next biennium to actually fund the new health sciences building. So again, for funding purposes, really successful session for higher education. There were also some other funds for some special projects on our campuses that were funded as well that I won't mention. But again, a lot of support shown for higher education by the General Assembly and from a funding perspective. And again, really, really appreciative for that. CPE's budget was held pretty flat. We received a small, about a $200,000 decrease, but that was just due to some calculations that were done across the board to all executive branch agencies, recovering some funds from some retirement contributions that we no longer make. So it wasn't really a targeted decrease, and that's one we'll be able to manage. But we also received $2 million to fund a study that I will talk about here in a minute. So we were glad to see get some extra dollars for that. You may, those of you board members that remember SJR 98 from last session, where we did basically a comprehensive review of all higher education in Kentucky and looked at Hazard Community and Technical College, or I guess a baccalaureate offering institution option in Southeast Kentucky, which ultimately led to the recommendation for Hazard Community and Technical College being expanded. We actually had to find the money for that project in our reserve funds, and we used those, but we were glad to receive some funding this session to fund 2 different studies that we'll be involved in that I'll talk about in a second. But anyway, very successful on the budget. I'll stop here. Does anybody have any questions about budget allocations for the universities in KCTCS? Okay. Well, then I guess I'll talk next about what didn't pass. Senate Bill 6, House Bill 9, the anti-DEI legislation went down to the wire. We had even heard in the last minute that even though after the General Assembly went home, past the veto period on the last day of the session, we heard that Senate Bill 6 might pass, even though the governor had indicated he would veto any anti-DEI legislation that came across his desk. But still, there was some interest potentially of passing a bill to send over to him. It was even put on the orders of the day to be heard in the late hours of the session on Monday of last week, but ultimately was not heard. So the bill was not taken up and not voted on. So no anti-DEI legislation this session. We do expect something to come back next session, based on some comments made in the media immediately post session. But we'll wait and see what that is, and certainly have some work to do in the interim to help guard against any legislation passing that we feel like will not allow us to do what we need to do in this group and at CPE and all across all our campuses. So, but anyway, no anti-DEI legislation. I believe the last time we talked about a couple of bills that have been proposed, but ultimately nothing passed. So, any questions about that?
Is there anything that we can do, Travis? I know obviously you all will be doing what you need to do in your lobbying efforts. Any sort of things that we need to do or should do or can do or help do?
I think we should talk about it. I mean, I've already, with the session having just ended, we've started conversations about it internally. I've certainly got some ideas, but I think probably at our next meeting, we should take it up, as I would recommend, Chair Walker, as an agenda item, just to talk about. At that time, we can talk about anything that's been done to that point and what we might want to do moving forward. We did a lot, I think, during testimony in committees, both Dr. Thompson and I, making some public statements or comments and interviews about this, and sort of educating folks as to what DEI means to us and what it actually is and what's actually going on our campuses under the umbrella of DEI. I think it's important. I think this committee can help with that. And come out with sort of a strategy on educating some key legislators and just the legislature at large on what we actually do and the value that it provides on our campuses. So yeah, no, I think we should absolutely talk about that.
And as everyone knows, as you reviewed the packets that were presented, when you see the success that our colleges and universities are realizing, not just in URMs and first-time attendees, but across the board, that has to show that these programs are effective in not pushing some down while they raise others up, but in raising all boats. And so it'd be great for us to be able to hear next time what you think, what arguments you think were effective, and what we can do going forward.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I talked about this in meetings, and both, private meetings with legislators and publicly, about some of the initiatives that institutions report on through this process. And one of the things that we stressed was, we're targeting students that need help, and don't take any tools away from us in our tool bag in order to help these students. So if you're going to pass any legislation, make sure, that you don't tie our hands in helping students that need it, and allowing us to target the supports of these students, that can help them to be more successful. And I think, there's no one thing that I think kept the legislation from passing. I do think that the Senate and the House were, I like to think about things in terms of in attorney's terms and settlement. If you've got two parties trying to agree on a settlement, then the parties are just too far apart and they can't agree, and they'll move on. I think that's kind of what happened. I think the two chambers were just a little bit too far apart. So I think they'll spend some time on trying to get on the same page in the interim, but we can help shape that conversation, I think. And again, if they do want to pass something, and make sure that they don't do anything that ties our hands for these programs that we know are successful and that we have data to show that they've been successful. And to your point, Chair Walker, that it is not about excluding anybody in any of these processes. It's an all ships rise kind of thing. So, and I think we can even expand upon that more in the interim. So be thinking about that between now and our next meeting. I would encourage you all to do it. We'll certainly take that up next time, if you'd like.
Travis, I'd just like to say thank you for all your work on this. I know it was a lot, you and Dr. Thompson, everyone. So I'm just very appreciative.
You're very welcome. and even, I said in the testimony I'd made before the House Education Committee, I talked about, how we take our role as advisor to the General Assembly very seriously. And we don't do it in an adversarial way, even if we do disagree. And, despite vehemently disagreeing with many legislators, had very good conversations. And I think all our comments were well received, and I think heard, and some changes were even made, if not to the level that we wanted. But I think it's important that we're able to engage with legislators on both sides of the aisle, and even when we don't agree, and give them the information that they need to help them to make decisions. And, I think we played our role well this session, and I appreciate you saying that.
Are there any other questions for Travis? Thank you again for your support and for your updates. We look forward to next meeting.
Yep. Thank you.
And I noticed that Reverend C.B. Akins has joined us. Thank you for being with us. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Chair Walker. Sorry I'm a little tardy. I had another meeting across town.
Busy man, we understand. We are now going to have an overview on the evaluation process. And before I introduce the Gaines Brown, I did want to reiterate what Travis said. Anyone who's gone through the process and gets that packet of material that they have to review, it's a little bit overwhelmed, and everyone takes it seriously. And the one thing that always reaffirms my interest in making sure that we do the right thing is that we generally are on the same page when we are reviewing those reports. And so I want to thank you for the time and commitment that you make. Now I'd like to introduce Gaines Brown, who is the Associate for Access, Engagement, and Belonging, to provide an overview and refresher for this institutional diversity strategy evaluation process.
Thank you for that, Chair Walker. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Well, now I can't even see my screen. That's interesting. Okay. All right. Perfect. Waiting on my computer to cooperate with me. We've had a lot of technical difficulties today, but we're going to persist anyway. So while I'm waiting for this to pull up, I just want to say thank you all again, and really echo those sentiments, especially because this year was the first time that Jessica and I actually participated in the scoring process. We've experienced a lot of attrition with respect to the CPE staff that was going to be able to provide us that support this year. But being fully immersed in the work this time was incredibly challenging on this end for sure. But it allowed me the experience to be able to understand the heavy lift and thought leadership and the insights that are necessary to score these reports adequately. So I just want to say thank you all to everybody that took part in this process. And what I want to be talking about today is, I guess, the formal mechanism that is the reporting process. And this is the annual report from 2023, and we're looking at both the quantitative and the qualitative analysis for that. And the rubric is divided into two sections, which is the qualitative section and the quantitative section. The minimum score for eligibility to offer new programs is 24 for universities and 22 for KCTCS institutions. The reason for that difference is that universities have the graduate school option, whereas KCTCS does not. So we're looking at these quantitative metrics, and those include undergraduate and graduate enrollment, this persistence rate from first to second year, and this is also called retention for your and low income students. And we're also looking at graduation rate for these demographics, degrees conferred, credentials awarded, and also workforce diversity. So what does campus leadership look like? What does the tenure track faculty demographic makeup look like on these institutions, campuses? And there are 9 areas for universities and 8 areas for KCTCS institution scoring. And 2 means that the annual target was met or exceeded. 1 means that the target was met but lower than the 2020 to 2021 baseline. And 0 means that the value is less than the baseline. And again, we're looking at these focus areas that include opportunity, success, impact. And this is informed by our statewide diversity policy for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And each of these focus areas are evaluated on the criteria below that states, that assesses whether or not the strategies were implemented with fidelity, providing analysis of that strategy effectiveness and what were some of the next steps and lessons learned that were associated with that process. And similarly, 2 means that a score of 2 means that the report met or exceeds expectations. 1 means that an institution is making progress towards meeting expectations, and 0 means that they do not meet expectations. And we started here soon. I'll back to you, Chair Walker.
So our first team was headed by Enid Wolstein. Did you want to make your presentation? We look forward to hearing all about it.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Walker. And first, I would like to thank Commissioner Allen and Dr. C.B. Akins. We met many times and had very long discussions, and we were all very committed to this process of giving thorough feedback and analysis of the reports. So our first is Hazard Community and Technical College. And on the qualitative scores, the final score from our team was 14 out of 18. Progress is being made at Hazard. We were looking for measures of the strategies and effectiveness and articulation of the successes. And with Madison Community College, we scored them 18 out of 18. Madisonville is intentional in its diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and provided data in a well-written report with clear lessons learned and next steps. Somerset Community College, we scored 12 out of 18. The statements of intent in their diversity recruitment are good, but we were looking for measures and more clear lessons learned. And then lastly, Kentucky State University, we scored them 9 out of 18. They are working hard and their new initiatives seem promising. We were looking for outcomes and results of clearly articulated goals. And since Commissioner Allen couldn't be here, but Dr. Akins could, would you like to add anything?
Nothing in it other than we talked about perhaps restructuring or at least rewording our rubric a little bit. Sometimes if we don't get the answers that we want because we don't ask the questions as clearly and as in the format that would dictate those answers. So we talked about that. That's all. But otherwise, thanks to Enid for leading us through. And this was my first, and so I try not to drag my feet too much. I couldn't contribute, but at least I could pick my feet up. So.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of Enid on this report? Thank you to the whole team for your work on
Thank
this.
you.
Team number 2 is headed by Chris Ledford. Chris?
Good afternoon, Chair Walker. Before we get started, I would like to echo what others have said and thanking the various folks who've been engaged in this work, from the committee, to our local team at CPE, Don Gaines and their team have done a fabulous job with this, and appreciate your important work. First up is Ashland Community and Technical College. They had a total score of 15 out of 18 on their qualitative scores. Like all of the other institutions we reviewed, a tremendous set of strategies that we enjoyed reading the narratives about. The points that were lost here were due to some misalignment between measurement and the strategy that was being discussed, but overall, great strategies. And we felt like next year, if there's a little more synthesis between the analysis and the strategies themselves, that Ashland will be really set up for really high marks. Next, we had Henderson. They had a 13 out of 18. Sorry, I had a glitch there and a thing pop up in my screen. Overall, our committee agreed that the institution's taken a really holistic approach to creating a strong and inclusive campus. Next, we had Northern Kentucky University. Again, this institution had a really holistic approach to creating a strong and inclusive campus environment. Throughout their narrative were principles of cultural competency and inclusivity. What our committee really enjoyed reading this is their report and their strategies touched on just about every layer of university operations that we could think of, from university policy and governance to the first year student experience. So really articulate and powerful narrative. And finally, Sky CTC, a 16 out of 18, another really strong score. And again, we really applauded the institution's holistic approach to inclusion. Some points were lost. Again, there was a little misalignment between strategy and ultimately the analysis that was used to measure that. But something that can be cleaned up next year for a even better score. But overall, a really great set of strategies and narratives to read about good work going on at these campuses, and thanks to the folks who are doing this important work at those campuses. Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to comment or have any questions for Chris about their report? Thank you very much, Chris. And now Gaines Brown, who leads Team 3.
Trying to run the slideshow in the meeting and also present is a little bit of a challenge, but we're pushing through. So thank you, Chair Walker, for that. Yes, this is my first time serving on a review team, and just reading some of the narrative reports was incredibly fascinating, and just being able to participate in this process was definitely very transformative. So I'll move forward with our first team. We had West Kentucky Community Technical College. We thought that they had a very thoughtful and thorough report. Some of the points lost, let me take a step back. We gave them a 16 out of 18, and you can tell that it was a comprehensive and cogent report, because it wasn't as if multiple people just copied and pasted into a narrative, and that it was one singular voice that wrote the report, and that level of cohesion was definitely appreciated. Part of the reason why we took away some points from the impact was the lack of analysis that was present on one of the strategies. But we do believe that they're doing great work there at West Kentucky Community Technical College, and we look forward to the great work that they're going to move forward with in the future. And with I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure why this says 17, but it's supposed to be an 18 out of 18. So my apologies there, but we gave them an 18 out of 18 for the qualitative score. We think that they do exceptional work there at OCTC. They have a comprehensive approach that shows their dedication to persistence and retention through their various programming initiatives within the Pathfinders Day. And we weren't shocked at all by the great work that takes place at OCTC, and looking forward to what practices they implement in the future. So with Maysville, we also, the reports that we received was incredible. And Maysville has done an exceptional job of implementing their strategies as well. Yeah. Oh yeah, so my apologies for the transcription error on the qualitative scores, but the total is correct where they received an 18 out of 18 for the qualitative scores. And they provided insightful reflections on their AE office, and they also provided a comprehensive annual report that demonstrated quantitative metrics as well within the adaptations they made to college life post-COVID and implementing reviews of student progress and a lot of the efforts that they have there on their campus. And lastly, we have Western Kentucky University. Their report was incredibly thorough. They received a qualitative score of 18 out of 18. And we were incredibly impressed with the work that they're doing with the living learning communities, with their student cultural climate survey, and of course their cultural competence certification. Really excited about the work that they're doing there, and they did an amazing job detailing a lot of the work that they're doing and provided analysis on the effectiveness, including data tables, data visualizations, and also shared some thoughtful insight on what they plan to do next. And that's all that I have.
Are there any questions or comments for Gain and his team? Thank you very much, Gain. And now our illustrious leader of our team, Adam Blevins.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And before I take off, just as everyone else has done, I want to give a huge thanks, of course, to Chair Walker and, of course, Faith Kemper as well for being on this team and working through these plans. There's a lot of content, there's a lot of information to go through, but it was incredibly refreshing, not only to see what was going on kind of at that institutional and at that ground level, but also to work with both Elaine and Faith, working through this, getting their perspective, and really helping me sort through this, as this is my first time going through these plans as well. Huge thanks to everyone involved with this, and of course the institutions for the fantastic work they do, and Gaines for answering my many email questions throughout this process as well. But yeah, so we will go ahead, we'll jump in and we'll start with Big Sandy. I'll keep this as a pretty high level overview. Overall, all of these plans, all of the reports that we received were fantastic in terms of the content. Again, it's wonderful seeing all of the great work going on. The final score, the total score for Big Sandy that we landed on was 14 out of 18. Most of those losses really coming primarily from some issues even with the continuity of some programs from last year that were referenced throughout the report, as well as just some general loss in terms of effectiveness reporting, data reporting, mostly related to staff turnover, things like that that were also cited. Overall, it's a very strong report. The alignment's really good. And the strongest section here is probably the lessons learned. I think they lay a really good foundation in terms of, what the next steps are, where the development will continue to be for the future of Big Sandy. And so we can jump over to Moorhead. We again landed at a 14 out of 18 on that qualitative section. And in this case, there's a lot of evidence, especially with the implementation with Fidelity, of dedicated resources, a lot of fantastic work going into student-facing programs, some of the financial commitment, the staff commitment to support students. And really where the loss of points come in is largely at that alignment level, making sure that all of that has kind of a through line between the implementation, some of that effectiveness tracking, and then resulting in the lessons learned, which at times felt somewhat ambiguous in the text, but overall I think it was really well supported, well documented, and a well done report as well. For Jefferson, we landed on a 17 out of 18 for that qualitative section. A fantastic plan with a really, really clear through line from implementation all the way through to the lessons learned. There's clear evidence of a lot of that gap analysis coming in on the front end, a lot of the evaluation, and even in areas where there may not necessarily be results available to discuss in this plan, there's sufficient evidence and sufficient detail to really support the work that's being done through the next steps and through the documentation provided in the report. And I will say on this one, the any points lost were primarily due to alignment throughout the narrative. And with Bluegrass Community and Technical College, we scored it at an 18 out of 18. There is a ton of fantastic work that is shared in this report throughout the entirety of it. From implementation, there's really clean kind of effectiveness measures and data provided as well. And also lessons learned provide really clear and concrete next steps for each of the strategies listed. I will also say with this, there's a lot of pilot programs that were mentioned that are really exciting, and I'm eager to learn more about in subsequent years as well. But just a lot of really good work with pilot programs that show really efficacious results in year one with small samples. And again, they tie in well with that lessons learned for their next steps on what that development may look like. So overall, fantastic report from Bluegrass Community and Technical. Thank you all.
Are there any questions or comments for Adam and his team? Thank you, Adam, for your presentation and for your leadership. For Team 5, we have Sterling Creighton, who will provide the report.
Thank you, Chair Walker. I'd like to also thank Rochelle and Kelly for their help in all of this and thoughtfulness and approach to grading these reports. Also like to thank Gaines for being so helpful and responsive throughout the process. We had some missteps, but he definitely made sure we got on the right track where necessary. The first institution that we have is the University of Louisville. It's going through. Okay, there we go. They received full credit from us for their qualitative section. There may have been one or two specific goals where we might have liked to see a little more intention behind that goal setting, but they really did a good job of showing their effectiveness of that goal, even in places where implementation and evaluation was ongoing. And so it never really rose to the level of a deduction in points. Next, moving on to Southeast. They did a really solid job with their goal setting. And we ended up giving them a 17 out of 18. There were instances where they only stated data points to show effectiveness without any analysis or explanation of recent trends. And they also lost points in the lessons learned sections because there was a couple of instances of explaining actions already taken instead of goals being set for the future. So they lost points there. But overall, it was a pretty good report. Hopkinsville was our next one. This was a pretty lengthy report, so we have a lot of specific comments. But overall, we found a few goals that were a bit vague and difficult to measure, which you could imagine kind of complicates that score is not correct. We ended up giving them 14 out of 18, I believe, for the total. But either way, the difficulty to measure some of their goals kind of caused issues with them being able to analyze the effectiveness of those goals. And they also ended up losing points in the lessons learned section because they didn't really offer as many lessons as we would have liked to have seen. Really just mentioned like a possibility of expansion for some of those initiatives that they have on their campus. And then the last institution that we had was EKU. They ended up getting a 16 out of 18. The report was pretty good overall, but we thought their approach to a couple of the effectiveness and lesson learned sections were a bit vague and generic. And the reason behind that was because they have evaluations ongoing for some of the programs and initiatives, but they didn't really offer as much as information that we would have liked to seen. And as we saw on some other reports that kind of faced the same issue. So we ended up on a 16 out of 18 for those.
Sterling, can we go back to the numbers for Southeast Community and Technical College? Because it seemed like the totals might have been off a little bit.
Yes, I wanted to make sure I provided a disclaimer, as a lot of the numbers that for these institutions that have been present for us in our presentation today have been incorrect, and that's an oversight on my end, and I apologize for the inaccuracy of the reporting numbers for our presentations. However, the rubrics that have been provided to the institutions have been correct. However, when I was creating the presentation today, it may have been rushed. So my apologies for that, but I want to make sure that I provide that information for everyone that's on the call currently.
Thank you. So on the Southeast Technical, Community and Technical, was that 15 out of 18?
For Southeast, hold on just one second.
On my end, I believe I have a 17.
Yeah, you had a 17.
Yes, on our rubric.
Yeah, that was a 17 out of 18.
Okay, so the actual scores themselves are off.
Yes, for some of those other sections. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So 17 out of 18. All right. Thank you.
Right.
Are there any other questions for Sterling?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say that, so for the success portion of this report, it was a 5 out of 6, and then for impact, it was a 6 out of 6.
Okay.
Those columns.
Thank you. That clarifies that.
Yeah, I apologize.
Not a problem. Thank you very much, Sterling. And for Team 6, we have Ray Smith. So Ray, you'll be presenting Team 6?
I think Ray's on mute.
Yep, here I am.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Chair Walker. Sorry about that.
No.
I wanted to thank the team members who took time from their schedules to read, score, and share insights. Kim Welch and Robert Croft both served on this committee. And our committee's read the reports for these same 4 institutions for 3 years now. And it's been encouraging to see the growth each institution has made and how DEI efforts are woven into the fabric of the institution's student success efforts across the campus to provide a welcoming environment to those who have not had the opportunity to participate in post-secondary education opportunities in the past, and how these efforts provide benefit to all students. So DEI, as it appears in these reports, is not an office on campus, but it's a part of how our post-secondary institutions create a community where students have a sense of belonging and can be successful. Our first institution is Murray State University, and we scored Murray 18 out of 18. Murray's made diversity a part of their mission statement and has faithfully implemented programs and strategies to actively engage students, faculty, staff, and the community in those efforts. And the scores reflect that commitment. Some examples of what they've done are focused student recruitment with outreach to high schools and community college, efforts to bring students to campus and set enrollment milestones to move students from admit status to enrolled status. They've increased scholarship dollars and made efforts to make those scholarship awards earlier so that students make a commitment to attend. And they have made a concerted effort to identify faculty vacancies, expanding faculty recruitment efforts, and introduce potential candidates to the community. And even though you saw that we gave them the highest scores in all areas, there were a couple of areas where there were split scores within the committee, mainly within the success and impact areas. And that was mainly due to a lack of clear reference to data within the narrative of the report. And in some areas, it was not clear in the report how strategies contributed to the outcome. So there are a couple of notes regarding the report. The report tends to address the strategies as planned actions rather than clearly state what has been implemented. And the overall report would benefit from a consistent voice and a continuity in the reporting style. But finally, there's an appreciation for the university's ongoing commitment and the successes that have been realized. For Gateway Community and Technical College, we awarded 16 out of 18. Gateway incorporates principles that they articulate as educate, embrace, and encourage to nurture diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have a collaborative environment where faculty and staff work together to offer students a supportive academic experience and provide support services to reduce non-academic barriers. Some examples are their participation in a Moonshot for Equity program, which is a national best practice initiative. And this led to retention grants, which paid off balances for qualifying students and reform in administrative holds. They found out some of the reasons that students really seek academic counseling, and the administrative holds was not doing what they thought it would do for those students, although it was very important for students who had academic issues. They expanded their non-academic support services, including moving DEI efforts and counseling into classrooms to reach students, providing peer mentors and student resources to address non-academic barriers. They have added DEI curriculum to their human services and social work programs, and we found that commendable, but wondered why it was only in those two programs. But they then use the students in those programs to act as ambassadors and welcoming role models for recruitment efforts throughout the campus. They offer professional and personal development opportunities for their staff and faculty in multiple formats. And they formed relationships with targeted high schools in the area, including with counselors in those schools. They saw success with Kentucky schools with plans to strengthen relationships with Cincinnati counselors. Here's some areas where they had needed further work. While their strategies didn't prove to be successful in increasing enrollment from Cincinnati schools students, responses were complete and they addressed the questions asked. And although the review team appreciated the difficulty in making the institution visible in an area with many competing post-secondary options, the review team did question whether or not the advertising investment should continue as the next step, given they had zero results from that initiative, and when it was relationship building that appeared to be more effective. Their next steps for professional and personal development opportunities for faculty and staff appeared to be missing from the report, but we were able to find enough evidence about those initiatives under other headings, and therefore were able to award 1 point in that area. Again, Gateway found recruitment success by building relationships with area high schools and counselors. Data was collected and analyzed for each initiative, and good emphasis on addressing academic and non-academic barriers that students face. The University of Kentucky had an exemplary report which showed collaboration across all areas of the university. And this is a plan which could be used as a best practices resource for other institutions. Highlights included their UK 101 orientation course to increase the sense of belonging and make students aware of student support services. And they provided a truly deep analysis of the impact of that course. They use scholarships and aid to support access for special populations. And while those opportunities are open to all, they enhance recruitment and support for URM and low-income students. They have priority registration for low-income and first-generation students that come to the university with no prior credit. They participate in a national name exchange program, which is a cooperative effort with other institutions to get names of students seeking graduate study opportunities. They have good quantitative and qualitative data on advising for degree completion and career planning and professional development for those who serve in advising roles. The University of Kentucky has a strategic plan principle of bringing together many people into one community. This clearly articulates what diversity looks like in practice. Their diversity programs reach out to underrepresented minorities, low-income, adult learners, first generation, differently abled, religious minorities, veterans, Appalachian students, international students, and these efforts lead to an increased sense of belonging and better services for all students. Finally, Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. We awarded highest scores in all areas for Elizabethtown. And this is a good example that it's not only a large flagship university, which can do excellent work, but a small community and technical college which can also demonstrate good work in this area. In addition to underrepresented minorities and low-income students, Elizabethtown's initiatives include military-affiliated populations and women pursuing traditionally male-dominated fields. The institution also added an emphasis on increasing diversity of faculty, administrative, and other staff to reflect their URM goals. And they met that goal for both their administrative and other staff. The report provided good data analysis around, including a comparison for focus groups to control groups, and including analysis for data of staff, administrative personnel, and faculty. They saw results from strategies and provided detailed next steps to build on success. They even admitted when some of the things that they were doing, like cultural activities, may not have had a causal relationship to the outcome, but still articulated the benefits such exposure had for potential student growth. Overall, they had clear strategies with good data and deep analysis, collected data through several methods, including surveys and tracking participation, and documented their successes and detailed plans to build on the work already done. And the results of these efforts enrich the opportunities for success for all students, and they wrote an excellent report. So thank you for the opportunity to learn about the efforts from these institutions.
Thank you very much, Ray. Are there any questions or comments? Appreciate everyone's participation and those reports. If I'm not mistaken, it looks as though there were 2 institutions that did not meet the minimum required, a score of 22 for Community and Technical College, Somerset and Kentucky. Somerset did not meet the minimum, and then Kentucky State did not meet the minimum. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then you will be working with them in terms of follow-up and their plans going forward, correct?
Yes, ma'am, and that's the next part of the presentation.
Okay.
So
Please
at this
go.
point, we'll talk about the next steps. Next slide, please. So institutions that score below the applicable threshold currently are not eligible to automatically apply for new academic program approval for the 2024-2025 academic year. Those institutions are Kentucky State University and Somerset Community College. But the wonderful thing about this process is that that's not the be all end all, that's not the end. So what institutions can do, if they so choose, to be eligible to apply for new academic program approval for the 24-25 academic year is to request a waiver process. And so they will submit an email to the Office of Access, Engagement, and Belonging at CPE no later than June 1st, stating their intent to apply for a waiver. Once they submit that email saying that they intend to apply, then our office will be able to send them instructions on what they will need to do next. And they will submit their improvement plan. And in that improvement plan, they'll address questions at that time that will discuss what they think in more detail happened as to why they did not meet the minimum required score and how they plan to address it, and ensuring that any finances, any funding that is associated with that is not, the funds are not directed away from any other programs in order to be able to meet that goal. And so once that improvement plan is submitted to the Access, Engagement, and Belonging Unit and finalized, it will be on the agenda, the October agenda meeting for the CEO for final approval. And once approved at that point, then that institution will be able to apply for new academic program approvals if that's what's on their agenda for the year.
Dr. Offit, I'm impressed with the notes that are taken in each of the teams. Is it your experience that the institutions that are applying for a waiver find those helpful as well?
So one of the things that is included in that process is more often than not a follow-up. So the institutions will request, they'll read those notes, and then they will request a meeting with the team lead that will be able to go into more detail to ask them some more specific questions, and team leads will be able to share a little bit more information than what they've shared today. It allows the institution, the institutional representative, the people who work on the team, the institutional presidents to be able to ask those questions. Because again, this process is a process that we want to have in place to assist institutions. And we want, at the end of the day, we know the institutions are doing some great work. Gaines and I have been visiting institutions throughout the year, and some of the things that we've seen have been amazing. And they put into context the reports, the information that we're finding in the reports that they cannot actually express in a 500-word narrative. And so being able to have those conversations is really fruitful and really helpful. So when we offer the opportunity for the institution to then discuss questions with the team lead, then they can ask questions about specifically, so you said in the report this, could you give us a little more detail on what you meant by that? And so it does, so the information is helpful. And then for those who don't meet the minimum required score and have an opportunity to even have further conversation has been fruitful for us, yes. Are there any other questions? So those are the next steps.
Excellent.
So then we'll go on to.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the floor for discussion on other business. Seeing none, we do look forward to having a more in-depth discussion on DEI legislation in the upcoming legislative sessions. At this time, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Faith Kemper, second by Robert Croft.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. The motion carries. We are adjourned until our next committee meeting on June 24th. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.